Today in Studio 4, iconic contemporary designers are on his agenda. Inform's dapper design consultant, Rupert Grant, returns to focus on indoor furniture that works outdoors too. Sitting on your deck, sipping a short drink on a trendy sofa is his idea of a bit of heaven. And we meet a drug policy researcher who has taken an in-depth look at the downside of medical screening. Will a full-body scan really save your life? Maybe not. Who needs medical screening, when and why? Maybe not you. And to begin the hour, she asks why a lot. Intrepid Tell the Truth No Matter What journalist Jan Wong of Have Lunch with Jan Wong notoriety tells us her personal story of dealing with workplace depression in her fifth book, Out of the Blue. Next. Journalist, now Senator Pamela Wallin, once called Jan Wong the Hannibal Lecter of the lunch set. That was when Ms. Wong was doing a fine job of skewering the rich, the rascals, the famous, and the not-so-famous in the Globe and Mail. Ms. Wong has had a storied journalistic career and recently took aim at herself and how she survived depression. She calls her book Out of the Blue. It's a memoir of workplace depression, recovery, redemption, and yes, happiness. It is my pleasure to welcome Jan Wong back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi.
An interesting journey for you, pointing the pen at yourself.
Right. It was pretty tough, but I always felt that the story is way more important than my own personal feelings. I thought it was a really important story to tell because I don't think there's any other books on workplace depression, and there are reasons for that.
There certainly are. Because first of all, when you're depressed, you don't want anyone to know, number one. And secondly, when you do tell someone, often they don't believe you. Not your doctor, not your insurance company, and all of that is reflected in here, I'm sure.
And there's another important reason, gag orders. When you finally settle with your employer, the money comes with can't talk.
Hence, this book is self-published.
Right, and so I had a Globe and Mail gag order, I had a Manulife gag order, the insurance company, and finally my own book publisher, Doubleday, that published my 4 previous books, pulled away at the last minute and also wanted to
shut you up.
So it was a really hard book to get to into the stores.
Yet by your reputation, as you know so well, you're an intrepid reporter, a tough reporter. You ask the difficult questions. You're used to getting crap all the time.
Yeah.
For your writing,
right,
and some lauds too, but a lot of crap. So take me to the beginning of this. When did it begin? What triggered?
There was a school shooting in Montreal at Dawson College in 2006. I was sent to cover it. I always get sent on these difficult, controversial stories. I wrote a controversial story that talked about how in Quebec ethnics feel alienated because all 3 post-secondary school shooters in Canada shot up schools in Montreal, and all 3 were ethnics. Now, I did take pains to say these 3 men were deranged, but I said, think about it. What are the odds that all 3 school shooters would be neither Anglophone nor Francophone? And I got a huge, huge response, mostly hate mail and horrible things sent to me in the mail, but that wasn't what triggered it, I don't think. They went after my family in Montreal. Separatist website attacked my father.
These are Quebecers, Anglophones and Francophones? Both?
No, mostly Francophones.
Mostly Francophones,
right.
saying
that I'm wrong and I should be shot, I should be killed, I should go back to China, I'm so ugly, and all the anti-female words you can think of and all the anti-Chinese words you can think of. And the first time I cried was when they called for a boycott of my family's Chinese restaurant in Montreal. And when they said that we were selling cat meat disguised as chicken. So that's when I started, the breakdown started then, but the real trigger for it was in my workplace when the newspaper, the Globe and Mail, hung me out to dry and said, oh right, she's wrong, you know.
She said something that we don't agree with, but we allowed her to write it.
And we edited it.
Did nobody check it?
It was properly edited. It goes through several layers of editors, and the editor-in-chief himself had read it. So that's why I felt, excuse me, not only did you want me to write this, you asked me for more. And I had no more because we were on deadline. That was it.
Right.
But you wanted more. You didn't recognize that this was a problem
So
only afterwards.
It was an opinion piece, a column?
It was a column, except it was a column feature because the Globe liked to do these features with a sharp point of view. So they put my picture on it and they explained this is my point of view. But that's all, you know, that happens in newsrooms. But what doesn't happen is when you betray your reporter. The newsroom pact is you publish it, you stand by it.
Well, especially when it's being lawyered and edited and the team says we're going to run this on the front page or the back page or in the middle, but it's okay, we agree.
Right. But that's not that's just the tiny tip of the iceberg, because after that, when I got sick, I got a death threat right to the office, and I have had one in the past and it was fine. They took care of it right away. This time, they wouldn't call the police, and I didn't know why. I still don't know why. I got it at work. The security guard took it with gloves on, and he said, we're calling the police. And 15 minutes later, I was called to security, and they said, we're not calling the police for you. And that I just couldn't understand what was going on. And then the publisher said he wanted to investigate what had happened, what I had done. All I had done was report a piece that was properly edited. So to make this a long...
Although controversial.
Controversial, but that was what I was supposed to do.
But that's what you do.
Right, I always did. I always did controversial. Tough stories. I felt that the journalist has to say things that she sees. Whether you like it or not, I'm seeing this.
And you don't have to agree with me, because the reason I wrote it is so it would stimulate conversation and you would have a new thought about this and think about is it called Pure Land?
Yes, Pure Land.
Pure Land in Quebec, Pure Wool.
Pure wool, pure blood. And I made the point that this is the only place in Canada where it's acceptable to talk about pure blood. But then the real betrayal by my newspaper, and what really sent me over the edge into depression, was when they didn't believe I was sick. And then they ordered me back to work, and they stopped my sick pay. And essentially, it was bad enough not getting paid for my benefits. I had no way to live, right? But worse for me as a journalist was being told I was lying. I only had my
your
integrity.
Depression.
Right, I only had my integrity. That's all I have as a journalist. So that really sent me into this prolonged depression, which lasted more than 15 months.
Wow, and you think your history, people who don't know it, you went to China during the Cultural Revolution. You were one of the first Western students to enroll at Beijing, if I remember. You lived under Mao. You went to Tiananmen Square. Last time I talked to you, you were moonlighting as a maid to try and figure out how domestics are really treated in the real world.
Right. It was a series on minimum wage. So all I had was my integrity. They had run my stories for 20 years. I'd never been sick before. This was my first sick note from a doctor, and they just didn't believe me.
What were your symptoms?
I cried all the time. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't remember anything, and I couldn't eat. But the most important couldn't was that I couldn't write. That's why I couldn't go into the newsroom. And it's really hard to prove a negative. Like, how do you prove you can't write?
You get a note from your doctor.
That's right, and that's what I had. And as the dispute progressed, she gave them all her clinical notes, everything, and they wouldn't believe her.
That is so odd, or is it?
Well, I'm finding out that it's not odd, and that's why I wanted to write the book. I'm all better now, and I found out that this is very common, especially with a mental illness. This is a mental illness, depression.
Right.
And people, employers, and myself, I didn't understand it. I didn't believe I was really depressed either. But I think in a case like that, you have to rely on the doctor. And if you don't believe the doctor, you can send me out to a third party, which they did. And that doctor upheld my illness. So they paid me back. I was better by then. They paid me back what they owed in sick pay, but they were quite angry with me. And so at work, I had a relapse. I went back to work, but I wasn't entirely better. Had a relapse. They cut my sick pay off again.
So they thought you were grandstanding.
Yes, I think they thought I was in a snit. I don't know what they thought. I didn't understand depression either, except that they're the professionals, they're the managers. They hire the insurance company. The insurance company deals with this. It's okay for me not to understand. It's not okay for them not to understand.
Was the insurance company spying on you?
Well, in the second time that I was depressed, well, it was the relapse, and they again cut off my sick pay, this time very fast. The insurance company, Manulife Financial, hired Garda Security, a big worldwide security company, and they followed me around secretly with video cameras, and they taped me in 3 different cities.
See,
just like China,
to
frankly.
see, no kidding, and you're familiar with
Yeah.
that. But it's so ironic because if I was your insurer,
Yeah.
I'd treat you really well because I
Thank
would
you.
know.
I wish you had been my
But,
insurer.
see, I would know that you could write about me.
Yeah.
And deliver bad press, as it's called.
Right,
So
but you would have
anybody
said,
with
we don't
clout-
care. We don't care. You know why? Because we're going to give her the money and we're going to make sure she signs a lifelong gag order. That's what would have been in the back of your mind.
Okay, but you're ungagged.
Because I won't sign it. Because
I
of-
see. So you haven't broken the law
Oh,
or
no,
anything.
no. I just would not sign it, and it took so long. I wouldn't sign any of them because as a journalist, I really believe in freedom of the press, and because I'd worked in China as a journalist, and I saw people go to jail for the right to speak, I just wasn't going to do it. And you forgot to mention, in all the things you said about me, I'm pig-headed.
That too.
I never give up.
I know you don't, and you're like the 60 Minutes person. You don't want 60 Minutes in your office.
Right.
Right, you just don't. It's not a good day. And I know you do that, and I know you have a sense of humor and a big brain and all of that, and are a perceptive writer. But when a perceptive writer can't write and starts to weep all the time, cries when she sees the Cocker Spaniel, something is up.
Right.
Did you get fired?
Yes. You see, the second time, well, when I had my relapse, they almost immediately cut off my sick pay, which made me worse. And then we had this stalemate, this sort of gray zone where I'm still an employee. I think I'm on sick leave. They say I'm not on sick leave. I'm not getting sick pay. And it progressed for quite a long time, and then they ordered me back to work. The same thing that they had done earlier, but now they couldn't cut off my sick pay because they'd already cut off my sick pay.
Okay.
So I wouldn't go back to work, so they said, if you don't come back to work, you're fired.
See, I thought that was illegal.
Yes, all this stuff is illegal, but the interesting thing is that corporations can do whatever they want, and then you have to pick up the pieces later. Everything, it's all illegal. I paid all my benefits. I had psychiatrist reports. I had 3 specialists, one of their specialists and 2 of mine, who said I was depressed.
Did they ask you questions like any depression in your family, any blue in your family, that type of thing, or did anyone care?
They asked, the assessment psychiatrist asked me, but he filed a report that said I was, but they didn't care. They paid for that report, and they didn't care what he said.
What about your fellow reporters?
You see, I was
Columnists.
gagged at that time, and I was an employee, so I had to obey the gag order. They said, do not talk about this. I was not
Okay.
allowed to tell my colleagues they didn't know. I had disappeared. They didn't know where I went. They thought, well, maybe she's writing another book.
So HR, that's
Yeah, HR.
what it's called, the Human Resources Department said, do not talk
What a
about this.
misnomer.
Yes,
Should
because
be
their
called
job.
inhuman resources.
Well, and some are very human, as you know,
Some are
and will go
okay.
to the wall for you at
Yeah.
any time. And obviously some aren't.
Yeah.
But what was funny about your story, and I have not read the book because it just arrived.
Sorry, it's because I
That's
self-publish, and I'm not very
I
good
was
at all this
thinking
stuff.
because I'm a cover-to-cover girl
I
when I
know.
do an interview, as you know, so I haven't read it. I
You've
know there's
always
a
read
lot
it in the past, all my books.
Okay.
And I apologize. It's my fault.
It's okay. It's not your fault. But when you self-publish, because Doubleday wouldn't publish you because they
Right.
didn't like what you were saying. Have you been sued?
No.
No. Okay. And Sheila Rogers.
There's been lawyerly things happening in the background, but
Right.
not on this.
Well, Sheila Rogers, who I admire greatly, and I suspect
too.
you do, CBC, she suffers from depression
Yes.
and is telling her story. And it's a brave thing to do. And she has said often, depression will steal your soul. Equal opportunity soul stealer, she calls it.
Yeah. And we don't like to talk about this. I think journalists especially, because we work with our brains, supposedly. Some people would say we don't.
Right.
But
Many
you
would
know,
say that.
If you have a mental illness and you are you work with your brain, it's scary. Who would ever hire me again? How would I ever do this? But I wanted to write this because I want people to know that depression is common, 1 in 5, twice as many women as men, but it's diagnosable and entirely treatable. and you can get better. And I'm completely better, and I have a job.
Okay, well, let's talk about your completely better and your job when we come back